So, this morning, I would like to provide some evidence that prophecy is indeed happening before our very eyes. This is concerning the demise of Europe and the finishing off or the destruction of the INF treaty between Russia and the United States and what that's going to bring. So, what I want to do first, let me go ahead and get screen share up. And go to Breitbart. No, not Bright. Is it Breitbart? Yes, Breitbart. Take a look at this. Viral video shows EU branded armored vehicles crushing Paris protesters. Well, that's a little bit mm, of an overstatement, I would say. What it shows is two um, EU armored vehicles entering the fray, and you can find it on Breitbart yourself. And Adrian Hilton on his Twitter account, he posts, I don't think people realize how profoundly concerning this is. It isn't just the symbolism, it's the EU versus the Gilets Jaunes, the Yellow Vests, the European Union against the French people. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Okay. Um, but you can go look it up on YouTube. You'll find them. You'll find the EU armored vehicles. So apparently, the elites in France and the elites in Europe are not listening. So, what I want to do next is to play this from what is his name? Steve Hilton. Steve Hilton, a British journalist, and see what he has to say about this. Please listen, it's very interesting. So there's Steve Hilton's take, and his take is correct. The elitists are blind. They're blind as bats. They think that they can hold on to power and tax the people into oblivion, and they um the history be damned. This is how they think. Meanwhile, folks, meanwhile, and of course, I wanted to casually mention this. If you would read, um, I believe it's in Daniel 7, where it says, "And throne." I probably should go there. Let me do this real quick before I get to my next um, subject on the table today. Daniel 7. Let's see here. Where it says, talks about the little horn, which is the guy at the Vatican, and the 10 horns, which are the kings of Europe. Okay. All right. And this continued right here, continued until the Ancient of Days came. It says right here, in the Ancient of Days is Jehovah, our Father in heaven. Verse 9, and I beheld until the thrones were cast down, overthrown. By whom? It doesn't say by whom, does it? Not right here, it doesn't. But in Haggai 2, it does. Okay? Haggai 2. Verse 18. Consider now, or this should be set now, from this day and upward, or from this day and forward. So you're supposed to mark your calendar on that day. What day? The 24th day of the 9th month on the Hebrew calendar. What day is that? That's the first day of Hanukkah. Yes, the day that the foundation of Jehovah's temple was laid. Set it. Is the seed yet in the barn? Yes. As yet the vine and the fig tree and the pomegranate and the olive tree, they have not brought forth. But from that day, what day? The 24th day of the 9th month, the first day of Hanukkah. And of course, the Maccabean War was like a prelude to the coming blessing, the Hanukkah blessing that's coming. But what else happens with the Hanukkah blessing? What happens with the Hanukkah blessing? What else happens? Verse 20, again, the word of Jehovah came unto Haggai in the 24th day of that month, saying, speak to Zerubbabel, governor of Judah, saying, I will shake the heavens and the earth, and I will overthrow the throne of kingdoms, and I will destroy the strength of the kingdoms of the heathen. I will overthrow the chariots and those that ride with them, in them, and the horses. This word is sus in Hebrew, not Greek, Hebrew, and it also means birds, war birds. And their riders shall come down, every one by the sword of his brother. Now, okay, so we see that the way the thrones are going to be cast down is it's going to be every one by the sword of his brother. Okay. Now, I want to show you this. Zechariah 14. When you read Zechariah 14, it says, behold, the day of Jehovah comes, and your spoil, that's Jerusalem's spoil, will be divided in the midst of you, which means the nations, the Goyim, are going to come against Jerusalem. Is it going to be all the nations around the world that's going to come against them at once? Probably not, because many of them have already done so. This appears to be, well, either the Northern Army coming down, or or the Northern Army coming down, and some of the other nations participating in the taking of East Jerusalem away from the Jews. It says the city will be taken. What city? What part of the city? And the houses rifled, the women raped, and half the city shall be. So they're going to take the whole city, and then they're going to remove the Jews from half the city, exile them, force them out. But the other half of the city will not be exiled from the city. Okay? At that time, Jehovah will go forth and fight against those nations, just like he always fights in the day of battle. And his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives, which is in front of Jerusalem on the east. So he's going to confront them in East Jerusalem. And the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof toward the sea and east and toward the west, and there shall be a great valley. Half the mountain shall remove toward the north, and half toward the south. Okay, so it appears that verse 6 is much like Isaiah 60 and verse 1. Okay, now and Jehovah shall be king over all the earth. In that day there shall be one Jehovah, and his name one. In other words, you're not going to call him God. You're not going to call him by some other name. You're going to call him by his real name, Jehovah. All right. And this shall be the plague wherewith Jehovah will smite the folk that wage war against Jerusalem. Well, who? Who waged war against Jerusalem in the past? Well, Rome. Yes, Rome. And the Ottomans and the Byzantines, which are also, once again, Romans. But the Byzantine Romans are today the Russians, the Greeks, etc. So this is the plague. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. And it shall come to pass in that day, at the same day, that a great tumult from Jehovah shall be among them. Everyone on the hand of his neighbor, and his hand shall rise up against the hand of his neighbor. When is this going to happen? It's going to happen when this particular plague takes place. Where does this plague take place? I've been thinking and musing about this for quite a while, and I think I might have an answer here. And it says, and Judah will fight at Jerusalem, will fight back, and they will win. Which means the taking of Jerusalem by the heathen will only be very, very temporary. They will fight back and they will win, and all the wealth of all the heathen round about shall be gathered together, gold and silver and apparel in great abundance. Now, this is very interesting. Verse 15. So the plague will be upon the horses. See this word, crane? Let me show you something. A swallow, a swift, a type of bird. That was the original definition, you see. And it just so happened that in later times, it also added horses, okay? But it appears to be warbirds. Of the mule, of the camel, and of the ass, Now this is where it gets interesting. It says all the beasts that be in these tents. There's a couple of interesting things here. This word, it's not beasts, it's cattle, behemoth, cattle. This cattle, do you think that the Russians, the invaders, are going to bring in cattle while when they invade Jerusalem? Where are these cattle, do you think? Hmm? We'll get there in just a minute, folks. Okay, let's think about this for a minute. And all the cattle that be in these tents now shall be the plague. Okay, so look up the word tents, encampment, a camp. Now, a camp can be the armies, it can be just camps or companies, bands. It can be military bases, you see. Interesting, right? Okay, this needs some explaining, doesn't it? Let's dig deep. Let's dig a little further, shall we? All right. Ezekiel 39, the slaughter of Gog and Magog's armies. Therefore, you son of man, verse 1, prophesy against Gog and say, thus saith Jehovah Elohim, behold, I'm against you, O Gog. Rosh. Okay, so I need to go to New International Version. I think that's where it's at. Is it? No. All right. Is it in New Living? It is in one of these. Please bear with me. It is very important to understand. Get this right. Here we go. All right. So in the New American Standard Bible, it gets this whole thing right. In you, son of man, prophesy against Gog and say, thus saith Jehovah Elohim, which it should be written, behold, I am against you, O Gog, prince of Rosh, Russia, Meshach, probably Moscow today, and Tubal, which is the capital of Georgia. Now, interestingly enough, Tbilisi is trying very hard now to get into the European Union, or get into NATO, I should say. Is it European Union? It's one of those two. Very interesting. But you've got to remember that the leader of Russia is actually was born and raised up until his teenage years in Georgia. People don't know that because he does not want people to know that, which is interesting that he calls him a Georgian, and that's an insult to somebody who's Russian by descent. Says, and I will turn you around and drive you on and take you up from the remotest parts of the earth and bring you against the mountains of Israel. I will strike your bow out of your left hand and dash your arrows from your right hand, and you will fall upon the mountains of Israel. You and all your troops and the people who are with you, I will give you as food every kind of predatory bird and beast of the field, and you will fall on the open field, for it is I that have spoken, it says Jehovah Elohim. Now, take a look, and I will send fire upon Magog and those who inhabit the coastlands in safety, and they will know that I am Jehovah. Okay, the coastlands. The coastlands of what? The Mediterranean Sea. Okay, so fire. But I thought it was written right here in what was it in I changed it. Well, in Zechariah 14, it says the plague, their flesh is going to rot away from their eyes and their mouth and their nose holes while they are standing. Well, folks, here are the locations of the camps, which is talked about in Zechariah 14. Magog and the inhabitants of those who dwell safely on the coastlands, right? So let's look at the Mediterranean Sea, shall we? All right. Mediterranean Sea, what do we see? See if I can get a picture up here. Well, there we go. All right. Dwells safely, carelessly on the coastlands of the Mediterranean Sea. What do you think that means? Well, that would also include Turkey, which is Gomer, which is listed in the nations of Ezekiel 38, and this whole entire region. It mainly means Europe, especially Rome, you see. So he's going to send a fire upon Gog, Magog, Gomer, Iran, all them here, and those who dwell carelessly on the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, so how? Well, we just read brother against brother, did we not? Nation against nation. It will also be then the Eastern Bloc versus the Western Bloc. Let me show you something. So we have the cancellation of the INF treaty. It's about to happen in 60 days or 60 days or less than 60 days on Bloomberg by Stefan Kravchenko, December the 5th. Russia threatens to target U.S. allies if Trump exits treaty. What? See, I thought this was rather odd, but I saw this particular type of this headline all over the internet. And I had to think to myself, what's going on here? It causes me to ask questions. If a country is threatening you and they use other countries to place their nuclear weapons in, wouldn't you target the country who's doing the threatening? You know, I'm saying if you were Russia, for example. No, he's going to target the countries where the United States puts their nuclear weapons, the locations. That's where he's going to target, is what he's saying. So take a look at this. Russia will target countries hosting U.S. missiles if Washington goes ahead with plans to pull out of a landmark Cold War arms treaty, General Staff Chief Valery Gerasimov said Wednesday. If the INF treaty is destroyed, we won't leave it without a response, he said in a presentation to foreign military attaches in Moscow, according to an official transcript. U.S. military professionals must understand that the target for Russian retaliation will not be U.S. territory, but the countries where the intermediate range missiles are deployed. I find that very strange. I find that odd. And I've been stewing over this since December the 5th, trying to find an answer for this. I think that the Russians believe that if they only target the host country, that the United States would not send nukes against Russia. Because they know if the United States does send nukes against Russia, they would be destroyed for sure. Either that, or Russia does not have the intercontinental ballistic missile range that everybody thinks that Russia has. Of course, I think the last is incorrect, implausible. I think they do have it. I think they do have the range. But when I look at this, I think about Ezekiel 39, where it says, I will send a fire on Magog and those who dwell in the coastlands and the coastlands of the Mediterranean Sea. And we just read in Zechariah 14 that it will be neighbor against neighbor. What do you mean, neighbor against neighbor? That's neighboring nations against neighboring nations. What do you mean, the plague? The plague of their flesh will rot in their nose holes in their mouth, and their eyes will rot in their socket while they are standing in their camps, in their military camps. I'm just, I find this very interesting. This is on Bloomberg. If you want to look it up, Russia touts combat lasers amid U.S. missile treaty. I don't know what the word a laser has to do with it, or it should read, Russia threatens to target U.S. allies if Trump exits treaty. And when was this? December the 5th. What is December the 5th? In the days of Hanukkah. So it appears, now I can't predict the future. I've mentioned this many, many times. I do not have the ability to prophesy. I go look to the prophets to find the answers, folks. But it appears that Russia is going to target the host countries. So you see, folks, what you got to understand is when Russia and the other nations come against Jerusalem, all those who ever came against Jerusalem will also be targets of Jehovah's wrath, the great plague. Rome. Look, even the British did it. Even the British. What is his name? King Richard. King Richard. Even he went and with his army to go against Jerusalem in his days. So the British will also be a target. The French. All of Europe. In the Crusades. Came against Jerusalem. So did the Byzantines. So if you want to know who is going to be, and here's the thing, just to make another point here, folks, we'll go back to Zechariah 14. Something very interesting here that is a little bit overlooked. After all this happens, everyone that is left, whoa, what? Wait a minute. What does that mean? Everyone that is left of all the Goi, which came against Jerusalem? Wow. Let's look at this in Strong's Concordance. This is after the great tumult from Jehovah, where they lay hold everyone on the hand of his neighbor, and his hand shall rise against his neighbor. Everyone that is left who remains alive some had some left. Oh, there was some left over. Man, this is sure enough looks like a nuclear war. Leave a remnant. The remainder, the survivors, survivors of all the Goi which came against Jerusalem, they shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, Jehovah of armies, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles, Sukkah or Sukkah. So the point is, there won't be a lot left of those nations that has ever come against Jerusalem, which proves that this great tumult and this plague is going to consume much of Europe, much of Russia, much of Turkey, much of Iran, and Europe. And because they are targeting this, I find this amazing. This to me, this particular article, how it is written is illogical. It could very well be that the United States has top secret missile defense systems that the Russians fear they cannot penetrate into the United States. So it could very well be the case. I don't know the answer to this. All I know is this seems illogical that the Russians would target the host countries. Anyway, I think I'm going to stop this right now. And if I get any more news, I will keep you abreast. I felt like I needed to cover this subject, especially. I just, like I said, I think that something else is going on here that somehow the Russians feel like they can't penetrate the United States with intercontinental ballistic missiles, so they'll target the host countries. So I think it is important to also count down the day, starting with, I guess it was December the 5th, 60 days to mark your calendar for that too. And remember, this all seems to not really begin on Hanukkah, but it seems like the light has been shining on it since Hanukkah. Uh, the the yellow vest people, the EU, um, military equipment coming in to help crush the revolution, and of course the obliviousness of the elites in Europe to see the handwriting on the wall. Their inability to see the handwriting on the wall is amazing. This whole thing is amazing to me, and it should be to you too.